Now I'd like to introduce our second panelist, Ms. Nina De La Cruz from the Christian Alliance for Indian Child Welfare. Ms. De La Cruz.
I just want to say thank you for having me today. It's been a long time coming. I've been kind of waiting for this for a while. I'm here as a mother. I'm a member of Spirit Lake Tribe. I'm also an addict and alcoholic in recovery. I have a little over 5 years of sobriety. Anyhow, so my child was one of the children that was brought back to the reservation under the Indian Child Welfare Act. At the time, I was living in Grand Forks. I had moved away for a while because, I was struggling with addiction and, there's really nothing on the reservation, Spirit Lake Reservation, to help, with that. Moving away by any means didn't help it. I still struggled with addiction, and my brother and my kids and I lived there, and when he found out that I was using methamphetamines, he took my kids and brought them back to the reservation. And, he did it for their safety, and I understand that now. I stayed in Grand Forks, however, and I kind of hit my rock bottom. I became pregnant. I was really made one of the worst decisions. I didn't quit. I didn't know how to quit, so my daughter was born. Addicted to methamphetamines. Sorry. Sitting in that hospital room, all by myself, I realized that, there was no one coming to save me, and that if I was going to do this, I had to do it on my own. So I made a decision that I was going to stop, and I was going to fight and get my family back. Social services had came, and I knew it was going to be a rough fight. I knew it was going to be a tough fight because, my family kind of had some ties to the council, and my sister was the ICWA representative, and I didn't want ICWA involvement. I hadn't lived on a reservation for almost 4 years at that time, and I had told social services that I wanted my case to stay in Grand Forks. It was my home. It was my child's domicile. I had the right to choose. I understand, why ICWA was created, and it's good for some cases. But the only thing about that is it stripped me as a parent of my right. I knew the day that I went to court for the shelter care hearing that I wasn't going to see her, and I would never get her back, and that is exactly what happened. Those choices I made in my life, led me to that, to those circumstances. But the consequences, the burden that I carry isn't all mine. I worked my case. I did everything that Spirit Lake Social Services required me to do, but I did it on my own. I lived over almost 100 miles away. I've been through the ICWA guidelines so many times. There needs to be people held accountable to how the procedures are for that. So I was in trial home placement, and I had gotten my daughter back. The judge or the councilwoman had issued an executive memorandum forbidding my daughter to leave the reservation. According to ICWA, there were supposed to be active efforts. All those efforts that were made were on my behalf. There were no resources offered to me, none of it whatsoever. The tribal court official, the juvenile presenter, she filed the TPR without consulting social services. She took on that role of a social worker and filed it on her own. Yesterday when my chairman was here and he was talking about the lack of social workers and about micromanagement and things like that, it kind of struck a nerve with me, because there's a reason why we have no caseworkers out there. In the first year alone, my case was so politically charged. I went through 5 caseworkers. One of them was excluded from our reservation for simply doing her job. 2 of our directors resigned. I went through 3 interns, all because nobody wanted my case, because of the the tribe intervening all the time. I went through 3 attorneys, and I submitted the resignation letter of my attorney, the last attorney, Christina, and she states in there clearly why she resigned, from her position, and it was because my rights were being violated. The social services director, the second one, she suffered, some repercussions for helping me as well. It makes it really hard to swallow sometimes, because my tribe that was supposed to help me, that was supposed to, keep my family together, ICWA, that was supposed to be, the goal is reunification. There was no reunification. My reunification wasn't there, and my tribe took that from me. Every step of the way after that, I tried to file appeals. Spirit Lake doesn't have an appellate court. I mean, every door that I went to, and I've went to many, many doors. I went to the governor, the senator. I went to the BIA. I talked to Scott Davis. And the part that made me feel like the way the tribal court system and all that made me feel was like I just didn't matter. Like I was lied to. I was treated with such disrespect. And I just, those rights that I was given as a U.S. citizen, my rights under federal guidelines, under state guidelines, like all those rights that I'm afforded as a citizen, I wasn't given. And I feel like it's because I suffer from a disease. And there's like no intervention. There's no intervention at all. I had to watch my daughter, all my kids. I think I have to watch them from the sidelines. And it breaks my heart because, the things I do, like the healing and all that stuff, it was never an option for us. I had to watch my daughter graduate from a window, And I get it, those are the consequences of my actions. But I got myself better. I did all that on my own. And then I feel like I'm just ostracized by my tribe when it came to getting my daughter back. They hurt me, And the thing of it is like, I didn't want to go back to the reservation because, number one, like, I wouldn't be alive today if I did. There's nothing there. Like, I had to go off of the reservation to get sober because there's nothing there. Like, I heard the people talking about, the children. Like, we need to help the parents, too. The parents need help to take care of those children. In my support group, I've run across so many girls that are in my situation, and it's just completely hopeless for them because, they try to do the same thing, but, the problems follow them. The addictions follow them, and then they end up losing their kids. And it's just, like, hopeless because there's no way to fight. Sometimes when ICWA should be enacted, it's not enacted. And sometimes when it shouldn't be, they do it. It's like there needs to be some type of regulations for that. Somebody needs to ensure that that's being followed. And there's not. And nobody suffers. Nobody's held accountable for those decisions that they make, like what they made in mine. They just get to get away with it. And that's not right. It's not right at all. It's been 5 years since since I've been able to actually see my kids, my older kids. It's been 3 years since I was able to hold my daughter. And it should have never been that way. The judge, even after my rights were terminated, they were going to give her back to me, the regional director, because I had filed the appeal in the state court for the transfer of jurisdiction. But they were going to give her back to me because it was the less restrictive placement until my appeal was heard. And the judge who was recused from my case turned around and took custody from social services without consulting them and gave it to an unlicensed foster parent. And it's just those kind of decisions, that's where the micromanaging thing, who's supposed to help with that? Who? I'm sorry, I just have so many thoughts in my head right now, but who regulates that? Who do we go to for that? There was absolutely no one to come in and jump in on my behalf to help where all that wrong was done. Nobody did anything. Nobody could do anything. I was always given, it was tribal sovereignty. They couldn't step in. And I just feel like there needs to be more regulation on that. There needs to be people that ensure that they're following those guidelines. Because I know there's not even no way for me to even fight my case. I've contacted attorneys. Mrs. Morris has helped me find an attorney, and I get the same response from over the 100 attorneys that I have called, is that you're going to spend hundreds of $1,000s to get it into a federal court, if they even take it, and you'll probably come out with the same decision you went in there with. And it's because of ICWA. And that's not what it was meant to do. I didn't have that happy reunification that ICWA was created for. Instead, it was used against me. And my child wasn't even given to my family at that. She was given to another lady. Even after the termination process, my niece was willing to take her, who was a licensed social worker, who was also the recruiter for foster parents, and they didn't even give her that option. And when I filed the appeal when I objected to the adoption, it was expedited. Even it happened within 3 weeks of my termination. They just went ahead and did what they were going to do because they knew I had no other options of getting her back. I talked to Jim Bluestone from the Northern Plains Appellate. He told me that coincidentally, 2 weeks after my rights were terminated, Spirit Lake had terminated their contract with them. He said that they had told them that they were going to have, set up their own appeals court, which never happened. And I don't know, I just feel like it was just wrong. It was wrong. Any way you look at it, it was wrong. And there's nothing I can do about it. But there needs to be something done. I don't want this to happen to anybody else, because it's not ethical. And I don't want anybody to know what that hurt or that pain feels like.
Ms. De La Cruz, thank you so much for your testimony. I see how difficult this has been for you. And I just want to say congratulations on your 5+ years of sobriety and for your courage in coming here today and telling us your story. I'm going to go ahead and see if any of our commissioners have questions or comments for Ms. De La Cruz before we move on to our third presenter. Commissioner Gray?
Thank you for your testimony today. I've heard you say on 5 separate occasions, this is the consequences of your actions. It's not true. You're human. You made a mistake. We all make mistakes. The system is not set up to support us. It's just not. And that's what we're trying to address. And I've heard you say that there's nothing you can do about it. And that's not true either. You're doing something about it right now. As hard and as difficult it is to put yourself out there, you are doing something about it. Is it enough? Not for your children. And that's not okay. For that, I apologize. My hope for you would be that you find a way to let go of the guilt and the trauma that you've experienced. It's not the consequences of your actions. It's the consequences of the system. It's a consequence of generations of injustices. And I'm so appreciative of your willingness to share your story. And I'm very proud of your sobriety.
Thank you.
Congratulations.
Commissioner Stabner.
Just want to say thank you for sharing your testimony with us today. And I've seen it as well too many times where our parents don't get the support that they need to keep their children and to also be reunited. So that is definitely, a gap in our system and something that we will, be talking about further, within our group. So thank you again for sharing.
Chair O'Neill.
Thank you for your story. It took a lot of courage and strength. I appreciate that you let your heart speak your truth. It's through stories like yours that I really learn. And I appreciate the learning because, as you heard the rest of the commissioners say, it'll help us get to where we need to go. So your partnership with us in this work is so very important. I know everyone sitting here, we're all here for the right reasons. We want to make it better. And doing this work, we have to have the open, fearless, honest dialogue, because if we don't hear all the stories, we may not understand it, and it won't get us to where we need to be. And so your voice, your leadership, your courage will get us to where we need to be. So thank you. Thank you for coming and taking the 2 or 3 days. And I thank Caesar for supporting you in this journey as well.
Commissioner Feinday.
Thank you. I just want to say thank you, Ms. Dela Cruz, for telling your story as well. And I think we all agree that focusing on prevention and services and keeping families together, that's exactly, what we want to focus on as well. And so just thank you. I know how difficult this is for you and the trauma that you have gone through. So take good care of yourself and thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. And I also heard you say that there wasn't anybody to turn to within the system to get the help you needed when you thought that the tribe was actually politically interfering with your relationship with your children. And that it kind of goes along with what Chairman Fairbanks was saying when he was talking about the commission that he is putting together to give some kind of buffer between the ICWA office and the parents' needs. And you had mentioned earlier that you had hoped that something like that would be established
in each reservation
across the nation.
Like, I get it that that's a heavy responsibility for anybody in that kind of a position. just watching like my niece, she went through some tough experiences being a social worker, and I get that. But what I don't understand is like the way that some of it is done. Like, okay, we'll take this one, but not that one. And it's kind of like the thing where it's because they know people. Like I know a couple of girls that weren't from my tribe, but they were from Turtle Mountain, and she suffered from addiction as well, and she took the steps to ensure that her daughter would be safe. And then when ICWA should have stepped in, when the lady didn't want to return her after the year was up, she went and got herself better. Like ICWA wouldn't step in, and they told her that it was only an emergency proceedings. But my understanding of ICWA is that it was supposed to be in any custody proceeding. Like you have a girl that just, she worked her butt off to get where she was, and she deserved, she deserved to have her daughter back. Like she did everything she needed to do. She's still sober today. Like she actually had to go to Colorado just to avoid, the lady coming to take her because Turtle Mountain wouldn't get involved. And it's just like how do you choose between that? You know what I mean? Like I thought it was for everybody. Like, and I went online and I found 7 different sites with like procedures, proper procedures, like guidelines, reference sheets for each entity. Like, why aren't they using those? Why? When I went back to the court in Grand Forks and he was questioning some of this stuff, I was like, I didn't want court, ICWA involvement. I said I declined that there was even, that she was even eligible for enrollment. And you guys still transferred her anyway. And then the prosecutor, all she could say was, well, ICWA trumps everything. And it's like, no, it don't. It says in the one reference sheet, you have to determine the child's domicile, the child's residence. If that's not the reservation, they don't have exclusive jurisdiction. And as a parent, I had the right to veto that. And none of that was heard. I wasn't even notified of a hearing. Like they transferred jurisdiction the same day I had the shelter care hearing. And that's my right to due process, even right there, like that stuff, like all that right there, that's where there needs to be somebody ensuring, or even there wasn't even anybody there to tell me about my equal rights, my rights under ICWA. When I asked for an attorney, she was like, oh, that will come later at your next hearing. That hearing that never came. Like, and I know I'm not the only one, and it's just, that's where I mean, like, there needs to be somebody there regulating that to make sure that those processes are followed, because they're not. And I know they're not.
I'd like to remind everybody that we will have more time for general discussion at the end of our next panelist's presentation. And so I want to go ahead and introduce Ms. Sandy Whitehawk, Elder in Residence, Indian Child Welfare Law Office.